We all pretty much accept that.
But we've been working on it.
We have been working on it with a lot of money on it. Parapsychology has not had a lot of money, and has still come up with some fairly remarkable things. I wanted to address, just one second, Kelly, because I wanted to address quickly how this can be taken into the lab. The haunted, the exploration of the haunted. In this one particular case, on the house I was talking about, where the voices were heard on the tape, there was also a particular phenomenon, some spontaneous movement of an object. This was a book on a shelf that seemed to pop out for no good reason. The researcher in question looked behind it and saw nothing there to make it pop out, and he pushed it back in, it popped out again. And it kept popping out back and forth. And he noticed that there was something like a 30-minute decay on this. And much later in the mouse ether experiment I was talking about, which is an experiment where two mice are anesthetized and a, quote, psychic healer, their term, not mine, is focused on one with the idea that this is a toxin, help the animal. And that animal comes up from anesthesia quite a bit quicker than the control, which is not being focused on. This experiment's in the literature, you can look it up and read it. He tried, based on that idea, taken from a haunted house, what was tried was having the subjects who were concentrating on it, the quote psychics, unquote, go away. And we continue to run pairs of mice in the same place and find out that the effect lingers. It stays where it is, and it decays slowly over a period of about 30 minutes. Much later, Nina Kalagina, who was a young woman from New York City, who claimed to be able to move small objects with her mind alone, was brought down to that lab and tested with a compass, and proceeded to make the compass needle stand some 30 degrees off true north. Apparently simply by concentrating on it.
Either that or she had a magnetic.
Either that or she had a magnetic, something or another. But the compass belonged to one of the researchers. It was sitting on a chair which belonged to the lab. Everything there was quite sound. And in having these linger experiments in the immediate background, one thing that's done with that is to ask Liz Kalagina to get up and leave the building completely. And she was taken completely out of the building and across the street. And the effect remained and decayed away for about 30 minutes, kind of eliminating anything she might have had under her fingernails, hidden under her skin, anything like that, since she was good 3 blocks away at
Are
the
you
time.
saying that because you personally could not find an explanation for the book or the compass, that makes it paranormal?
I don't use the term paranormal.
Supernatural?
I don't use that term either.
Out of this world?
I don't use that term either.
What term do you use?
I use the term unusual phenomenon. Now, those phenomena do not fit necessarily into things that can be explained by physical
Paris Hilton.
theory.
No, you can't explain it.
Why do we want to explain Paris Hilton? There's no driving need. All right, you've been very patiently, and by the way, I like this shirt. Anybody from Boston hates this shirt. All right, what is your question for the panel?
All right, this is for the skeptics. Have you ever put yourself in this situation or in the place as skeptics? Have you ever been somewhere that has been reportedly haunted to kind of actually determine and feel for yourself if anything might be going on, or have you always been sitting behind a desk saying, "Man"?
Oh, sure. I own all of the ghost hunting equipment, and I've been out to all different places with it and tested it out in different ways to see if it was really good for what it was supposed to be good for. Tested out the different ways that you can fool it, like an EMF detector goes crazy if you have faulty wiring. Infrared thermometers only measure surface temperature. None of it really works for what it's supposed to. And in all the haunted places I've ever been, I've never seen a ghost before.
Michael?
I just sit in my desk and say nay.
All right, what is your question for the panel?
Okay, so this is sort of a redirect and conglomeration of a number of questions, because it's for the believers, and I'm sort of confused about some answers you've given. So, And you asked a question, and I'll identify myself as a skeptic. So, why do I place such a high burden of proof? Well, we go back, sort of, as a previous questioner suggested, to natural philosophy. We have two large schools of thought, dualism and materialism. Okay? So materialism, everything at some level is stuff.
See, touch, taste, smell.
Some of it we can't see, but it's still stuff. And it's interacting with other stuff. And if we knew all the rules, we knew where all the stuff was, and we had a big piece of paper, we could work out what was going to happen next. Dualism, in addition to all of this stuff, there's spirit, which, for whatever reason, isn't stuff. And cares and has ideas and has motivations. And when you get right down to it, isn't driven by rules. So, pulling in some Thomas Kuhn and talking about the ways in which revolutions happen is another question brought up. What's your interpretive frame? Because it really does affect how you approach your science. If your interpretive frame is that of a materialist, then why are you quoting single studies? Why don't we have people repeating those studies in multiple locations and drilling down to the exact phenomenon and attempting to come up with an extension? It's materialistic, right? And if your interpretive frame is that of a dualist, then why go through all of this trouble with mechanical sensors and trying to find a mechanistic explanation for something which must ultimately be spiritual, unless you're trying to find sort of the definition of the interface between the two layers. I don't see a clear statement of intent or interpretive frame on the part of the believer community, which is, as a skeptic, why I place such an incredibly high burden on everything you say.
Is there a question there?
We might well, in the end, find an interface between the dualistic layers. But I tend myself to approach everything strictly on the materialistic side. I'm looking for an explanation. I don't care whether it's a materialistic explanation or something unknown. I've done experiments, I've observed experiments that that are not explainable by any of the normal explanations that go right, that can be applied to them right now. This is the history of science, for the last 200 or 300 years. And we just talked about Planck, the revolutions, the Pasteur and the germ theory that was bitterly fought against at the time. This could not possibly be true. Well, I don't necessarily have a theory as of yet.
So what do you
investigate? What I investigate is process. Understanding process it will eventually lead to a theory. There are some theories out there. Jim Carpenter, for instance, has one that's recently published in the Journal of Parapsychology.
But presumably you have a frame which allows you to decide what to investigate further and what is not part of your field. What is that frame?
That frame, I will basically investigate anything which people claim is unusual. If somebody comes into my lab and says, I can heal somebody with just the power of my mind, I'll investigate that. I will not let them play their own game, no matter what, because I know what I'm going to get if I do that.
But it sounds like what you're saying is that if you can't explain it, then it's unexplainable.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying if I can't explain it, then it's worth further study. I'm not saying if I can't explain it, then it's worth dismissal.
But what personally to you makes you so able to tell what is worth further study and what is unexplainable?
If I can't explain it, it's worth further study, period.
That's a question.